Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today we are going over my week number 6 top 30 running back rankings. And quickly before this video does begin, I just want to know in the comment section below if you would prefer tier list type of videos for these weekly rankings or do the start and sit. I'm fine with absolutely either, but I was getting a couple comments last week asking for tier lists, so we're going to bring you a tier list today. By the way, my tier list, if there are multiple people, let's say in B tier, there's no difference between the first person in that tier or the last person in that tier. They're all ranked in a similar type of grouping for me. So we're going to start off with S right now, S tier, in Christian McCaffrey going up against the Cleveland Browns. I don't really care, to be totally honest with you, who they go up against. Cleveland is a top 5 run defense currently, and I'm still having McCaffrey as my top play. You are absolutely crazy if you think that I am counting out CMC on any given week. Last week, he really couldn't get too much going against the Dallas Cowboys. The yards per carry wasn't too great. He should bounce back huge this week. Next up, I have Austin Eckler going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Eckler fantasy owners are awaiting his return like they're a kid on Christmas right now, and I do not blame them at all. Him and CMC are two of the best pass-catching running backs in the entire league. He is a must-start every week, in my opinion. Hopefully, he is back at 100% capacity in this game and not limited in any sort of snap count. And then he's going to be up in S tier here. In A tier, moving it down just one, we have Tony Pollard against the Los Angeles Chargers. He has been limited most of the week due to a shoulder injury, but I do believe that he should suit up for this matchup. He hasn't really got anything going these past 2 weeks due to the game script being so lopsided. Week number 4 against New England, they were blowing them out, and a lot of backups played late in that game. And then week number 5 against San Francisco, the exact opposite happened. They were the ones getting blown out by the 49ers. This week is a great matchup for Tony Pollard to get back on track against the Chargers, who are ranking 25th against the run so far. And this is projected to be the highest scoring matchup of the week. The over-under by Vegas is set at 50.5 points. So a lot of points should be scored in this one. Next in A tier, we have Kyren Williams going up against the Arizona Cardinals. He has been dominating the workload over Ronnie Rivers. It's about a 90-10 split in his favor. Last week, he struggled to get too much going against the Philadelphia defense, who is very tough. They have a great defensive line. Jalen Carter is looking like a stud on that defensive line right now. But Williams has scored over 17 fantasy points in 3 out of 5 weeks so far. Now he goes up against the Cardinals, who are ranking 29th against the run so far this year. And the Rams are favored by 7 points in this matchup. So if they pull ahead early in this game, they're probably going to lean on Williams late. And he is almost always involved in the passing game. So that's great for every PPR Kyren Williams fantasy owner. Next up, we have Josh Jacobs going up against the New England Patriots. He has been very ineffective on the ground up to this point in the year. But he catches so many passes that it really doesn't matter. The past 4 games, he's averaged a little over 5 receptions for 42.5 yards. All right, this New England Patriots team also can't even move the ball 10 yards down the field or sniff the end zone. I know this is an exaggeration. They can move the ball 10 yards down the field, but they can't sniff the end zone. They have not been able to score points all year long. So I could easily see Jacobs getting around that 20, 25, even maybe 30. He had it last season. Don't count it out of the equation. Carries in this game, grinding down that Patriots defense over the course of this game. Even if the Patriots finally learn how to play football in this game, Josh Jacobs, he catches so many passes like we talked about. It really doesn't matter. Still a play, still a must-start play, in my opinion. Next up, we have Alvin Kamara going up against the Houston Texans. Kamara has been the main beneficiary so far of Derek Carr's shoulder injury, if you ask me. Derek Carr has been checking the ball down a lot more than normal, which is obviously boosting Alvin Kamara's value in fantasy a ton. Although last week against the New England Patriots, he didn't really need to catch too many passes because they were winning that game the entire time. Kamara had about 22 carries, I believe it was. Since Derek Carr still doesn't look 100% in my opinion, I would expect Kamara to keep getting those check down passes at least for a couple more weeks. Now the Saints are going up against a Houston run defense that is ranked 25th in the league currently. But on the offensive side, since the Houston Texans have looked pretty solid, I think they should be able to keep up with the Saints in this matchup, which would once again call for more passes to go Kamara's way. Next up, we got David Montgomery going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How can you possibly bet against the guy who is getting so many touches on a weekly basis behind one of the best offensive lines in football, and their offense is just clicking on all cylinders right now? Also, Jahmyr Gibbs hasn't practiced up until Friday. I'm expecting him to not play in this one. The past few weeks, the Lions have been winning each and every one of these games and leaning super heavy on the run game. I am really interested to see in any of these games for the rest of the year, that is, if the Lions fall down early, how Montgomery is used. If he still gets those carries, if they still force feed him those carries, or if he's just not involved in the passing game and doesn't really get too many carries. All right, we'll have to see, although I will say it's pretty unlikely that the Lions fall down in a lot of these games for the rest of the year because they do not have a tough schedule at all. In this one, though, Tampa Bay should be able to hold their own somewhat to a degree, but overall, I expect the Lions to come away with another W and David Montgomery to get around that 20 carry mark yet again. Next up, we got Bijan Robinson going up against the Washington Commanders. He saved his week in week number 5 against the Texans with a dirty receiving touchdown, but overall, he struggled. I would not expect that to continue, though. Every running back in this league has a rough game here and there, and he is still averaging 16.4 PPR fantasy points, one of the best out of any running back in the league right now. This game should go exactly how Atlanta wants it to go, if I'm taking a look from the outside. Atlanta wants a game script where they can run the ball 30, 40, 45 times if need be. That's just how they prefer to play football. And Washington has struggled on offense, and Atlanta's defense has been one of the best in the league. So if they can get some turnovers, if they can get Washington off the field and Atlanta to stay on the field longer, then Bijan Robinson is going to get upwards of that 20 carry mark, and they can lean on the run exactly how they prefer to. Next up is Raheem Mostert going up against the Carolina Panthers. With Achane out for the next 4 weeks on IR, obviously, Mostert is going to see more action in these upcoming games. He's played great when Achane hasn't been active, by the way, and I certainly can see that continuing in this game here. Carolina is ranking second to last against the run this year, and the Dolphins are favored by 13.5 points in this one. If that plays out anywhere near what Vegas thinks it's going to be, then the Dolphins will lean on the run towards the latter portion of this game, and Mostert is going to get a ton of attempts. I would definitely have him in all your lineups going into week 6. Still in A tier, we have DeAndre Swift going up against the New York Jets. I don't see a scenario where the Jets aren't going to struggle on offense and moving the ball effectively in this game. That is going to put the Eagles in a situation that they love to be in, which is running the ball as much as they possibly can. All right, the Jets are a bottom 10 run defense so far this year, and Philly has the best offensive line in the league. That is not a good combination for the Jets, if you ask me. Even if the Jets can keep up in this one to some degree, Swift is still so heavily used in the passing game that I really don't think it matters. He should also be started in every one of your lineups this week. Next up, we have Travis Etienne Jr. in B tier against the Indianapolis Colts. Etienne is coming off his best game of his young career so far, and he should continue to dominate this season. I don't see any reason why that can't continue to happen. The Colts have a middle-of-the-road run defense right now. Not the worst, but also not great. But in week number 1, Etienne went crazy, scoring 21.4 PPR fantasy points against the Colts. The only reason that I have him below the guys in A tier is just because I like the matchup a bit better in A tier for those guys. Etienne is still 100% a start if you have him in fantasy. Next is Kenneth Walker, also in B tier against the Cincinnati Bengals. I feel very similarly between Kenneth Walker and Travis Etienne Jr. in this one. Not a great matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals for Walker, though. If you have him in fantasy, I'm still starting him 100%. He's coming off a bye week. The Seahawks should be nice and rested up right now. And Kenneth Walker is seeing a ton of work, at least 17 carries in his last 3 games. But I don't love the fact that he didn't catch a single pass against the New York Giants, although I will say the Giants couldn't even move the ball at all in that game. The Seahawks, I believe, tied the team record for sacks in that one. So I'm not looking really into that too much. I'm expecting a few more catches this week, and I'm expecting a very close game between the Seahawks and the Bengals. Well, hopefully we're in for a shootout. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but we would obviously love to see that. Dropping it down to tier here, we have Joe Mixon going up against the Seattle Seahawks. This C tier would be still players that I would be starting, but not 100% confident with. There's some question marks for me. You know, though, exactly what you're getting out of Joe Mixon on a weekly basis. About 15 to 20 carries normally, where he runs for 4 yards per carry and catches a couple passes here and there. He's going to have a breakout game every now and again, like he did last season with that 55-point game. But most of the time, you know exactly what you're getting with Joe Mixon. Seattle in this matchup has a much better run defense than their passing defense. I believe their passing defense is ranked 32nd in the entire league, so that's last. But if Joe Burrow can get cooking in this matchup early and score a lot of points, put a lot of points up on the board, then Joe Mixon is obviously going to get a lot more attempts as this game goes on. My main question mark for Joe Mixon is it's not even for Joe Mixon, it's for this Bengals offense as a whole. Can they really be trusted at this moment? All right, they had a great game against the Arizona Cardinals. I want to see that continue over into this game against Seattle, which, like I said, I expect it to be a close game. Next is James Cook going up against the New York Giants. This is a great situation for James Cook in this game against the Giants because they have been really struggling to stop any team. I do have some massive red flag question marks here for James Cook. Number one, the Bills as a whole just hate running the ball. They could be up 30, 35 points, 40 points, and still pass the ball almost the entire game. Number two is, how is he not more involved in the passing game? In this offseason, that's all we heard was that James Cook was going to be heavily involved in the passing game. And as the starting running back, that's something you expect. And that's something fantasy owners took a gamble on in this offseason, drafting James Cook. The receiving upside really hasn't fully been there yet, in my opinion. Number three is that, of course, you got Josh Allen taking away carries here and there, but the goal line opportunities is another thing that puts me off of James Cook. Clearly, I have more question marks than good things to say about James Cook overall, but this Giants team right now is ranking 27th against the run, so that does give me hope that he performs well in this contest. Also, the Bills are favored in this one by 15.5 points, which is the largest spread of the entire week. If James Cook does have a great game in this one, I would not think twice about going and trading him to somebody else in your league. Next is Saquon Barkley against the Buffalo Bills. If he plays, he has been limited at practice all the way up until Friday. So I'm hoping he's going to suit up for this game. Not a bad matchup against the Bills. ETN just ran circles around this defense last week, and they are super beat up at the moment. There's so many injuries to this defense. It's unbelievable. But of course, I am concerned about Saquon's health. Is he going to be 100% in this matchup? Also, another concern I have about Saquon is this Giants team. Will they be able to actually move the ball when Saquon is back on the field? That is yet to be seen here. Okay, Saquon provides very high pass catching potential on a weekly basis, which is good. But I certainly think there are better plays this week just because he could be a little bit limited from that injury in his first week back. I would give him a couple weeks. He should be back to himself and back to a guy that you can start every single game. Next is Derrick Henry against the Baltimore Ravens. 2 weeks out of the season so far, Derrick Henry has finished with under 10 PPR fantasy points. That was absolutely unheard of for the past 5 to 6 years now. Tajay Spears is getting a lot of playing time behind Derrick Henry, which worries me. Definitely does. Henry has showed his upside this season when they beat the crap out of the Cincinnati Bengals a few weeks back. But that's really what you got to count on, a blowout in the Tennessee Titans' favor if that type of game is going to happen, it seems like. Okay, I'm not sure if I can see that happening against the Baltimore Ravens, so that's why he is in the bottom of C tier here. Next is Alexander Mattison against the Chicago Bears. This is a great matchup against Chicago, who is ranking 30th against the run so far this year. As you can imagine, the thing I'm not really too thrilled about is Cam Akers eating into his workload. I can still see him, of course, having a good game here, but the risk for me is very high, much higher than I would normally like to put in my lineups. I view him as another guy that's very similar to James Cook, where if he had a good week here, I would definitely be trying to trade him to someone else in my league. Also, this offensive line at the moment has been atrocious so far this year. You can see it when Kirk Cousins is getting blasted in the backfield every single time. There's been almost no running room for these running backs. It's not looking too good in Minnesota. Also, now Justin Jefferson's on the IR. Like, can something go right for this Vikings team, please? Next, we have Zach Moss against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I debated putting Jonathan Taylor ahead of Zach Moss here, but I think he just needs one more week. One more week, and then I'll have these guys flip-flopped around. Moss put together an amazing performance against the Tennessee Titans last week, who had a good run defense heading into week 5, and he just exposed the crap out of them. This week, they get to go against the Jaguars, who are coming off 2 straight London games, but the Colts have no Anthony Richardson in this one. I think it's going to actually benefit the Colts more, or the Colts running backs, that is, without Anthony Richardson, because there's not going to be any design runs, and Gardner Minshew actually has been playing well. So I don't see a major drop off in terms of the Colts team without Anthony Richardson right now. Next, I do have Jonathan Taylor against the Jacksonville Jaguars in that same matchup. I just think you need a little bit more patience with him, like we were just talking about. This week, he should see more snaps than he did the previous week, and so on and so forth as the weeks continue. This will eventually be Jonathan Taylor's job again. I have no doubt in my mind. Obviously, they signed him to that long contract. Much better of a player than Zach Moss is, but Zach Moss has been playing really well. I'm not going to take away anything from him and his past performances here. Next up, we have Breece Hall going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. I love Breece Hall rest of the season, but not in this matchup. This is a really tough matchup here for Breece Hall, but he finally got going last week against the Denver Broncos, which was lovely to see for fantasy owners. His snap count restriction was finally lifted, and he went off, just like you remember last year with Breece Hall. Like I said, Philly has one of the best defensive lines in football. Although Jalen Carter did sprain his ankle, he might not be playing on Sunday against the Jets. If that happens, then I would definitely raise Breece Hall's ranking just a little bit more. If he can get involved in the passing game in this one, then I think he can still have a decent fantasy football game. But I'm definitely hesitant on his rushing ability in this one. I'm also worried about the Jets getting absolutely blown out from the start in this game and having to rely a lot more on the pass than they would like, especially with how inconsistent Zach Wilson has been over these past couple of weeks. I can't really tell what to expect from Zach Wilson right now. So that's why Breece Hall is a little farther down this list than he will be the rest of the year. Next up, we got Rachaad White going up against the Detroit Lions. I really like Rachaad White's workload that he's been seeing on a weekly basis, but the offensive line so far has just not been good at all. He's seeing a similar workload to a player like Joe Mixon, where he's going to get around 15 to 20 carries per game, 3 to 4 catches a game, but he hasn't found those explosive plays just yet. Detroit is currently ranking second against the run so far, so I don't like the matchup at all here, but he can certainly save his day in the passing game if the Buccaneers fall down earlier. Even if they don't, Rachaad White is heavily involved in the passing game. Also, the Bucs have looked surprisingly good for the most part, except for that Eagles game. I don't know. I could see the Bucs staying in this game and making it kind of close. Next, we have Dameon Pierce going up against the New Orleans Saints. This is another case here of the offensive line not giving him too much room to work whatsoever. The workload has been there every single week. He's gotten 20 carries the last 2 weeks in back-to-back games now, but the passing work has not been there. He saw just 1 reception in the past 2 games. Didn't find the end zone also in either of those matchups. If he does happen to find the end zone in this one, then he can certainly have a good game, but I feel like the situation has to be perfect. They're either like a pass interference where they get the ball within the 5-yard line, or they somehow just manage to get down to the 10-yard line and he scampers in for a little touchdown there. But the offensive, they are much better at passing the ball right now than they are at running the ball. That's the Texans, that is. The Saints have a top 5 rushing defense in this matchup, so overall, not too confident about this play. Dameon Pierce, he'll be fine. He'll be just fine the rest of the season, but nothing amazing if the offensive line keeps playing as poorly as it has. Next, we got Chuba Hubbard against the Miami Dolphins. Miles Sanders has been ruled out this week, which boosts Hubbard into the top 30 running backs, in my opinion. I was not the biggest fan of Miles Sanders and haven't been this entire season. The Panthers as a whole have really just struggled to stay in games lately, and I don't think this one is going to be much different. Like we talked about earlier, the spread is 13.5 points, so there's going to be plenty of passes going around for this Panthers team, which is great news for Hubbard because he catches a lot of passes. Now, he did have some chances as a starter last season. He didn't do too bad, but he didn't do amazing. He didn't blow anybody out of the water with that starter role, so that's why he isn't too high up on this list, but he's still a solid flex play in my opinion this week. Next up, dropping it down to E tier, we have Ramondre Stevenson against the Las Vegas Raiders. So far up to this point in the year, Ramondre has been one of the most disappointing draft picks in fantasy football. During the offseason, when I heard that the Jets were getting, they had Breece Hall and they got Dalvin Cook, and I thought this was going to be a very similar situation with Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott. But it just hasn't been the same because Ramondre hasn't really thrusted himself into that role where he is going to get almost every single snap. Like Dalvin Cook in New York right now, he's not doing anything. That's what I wanted to see out of Ezekiel Elliott. I wanted to see Ramondre Stevenson having almost all the work and playing well, but he's just not getting much work. He's not getting much passing work that he had last season, and the Patriots just straight up can't score any points on offense, can't move the ball at all. This is a good matchup. So in all reality, he should have a good game, but I'm not feeling great about it whatsoever. And if he does have a good game, I'd be trading him away. All right, as long as this Patriots team cannot put up any points, I don't want anything to do with Ramondre Stevenson right now. Next up, we got Jerome Ford going up against the San Francisco 49ers. He is still the running back #1 in Cleveland right now, but without Deshaun Watson starting in this lineup, I do not love the matchup for Ford whatsoever. Week number 4 against the Ravens, Ford couldn't get anything going on the ground, but he did see a lot of passing work. I can certainly see the same type of thing happening in this game against the Niners, who should be dominating this entire game. I expect Cleveland to be clawing their way back into this from down big, especially without Deshaun Watson in the lineup. Dropping it down another tier here, we have Brian Robinson Jr. against the Atlanta Falcons. Right now, Atlanta is currently ranking first against the run. The Commanders' offense has a habit of kind of falling flat in that first half. You saw that on last Thursday night against the Chicago Bears, which is a big problem. And that causes a lot of issues for the running backs. They have to get involved in the passing game. And if the Commanders had a choice between who's going to be on the field more in a game where they are losing, it's probably going to be Antonio Gibson. So Brian Robinson, the game script has to be perfect for him to succeed, and I don't know if it's going to be that way against the Falcons this Sunday. Next is Amari DiMercato against the Los Angeles Rams. James Conner is now on IR for the next 4 games, which means it's going to be either DiMercato or Keontae Ingram's job. Okay, and Ingram is technically listed as the #1 running back right now on the depth chart, but a lot of people don't think that's going to actually happen. DiMercato should see more action, and I do believe that is going to be the case. This week isn't a great matchup against the Rams, and he wasn't too heavily involved in the passing game last week against the Bengals when he took over that role for James Conner. If he does end up seeing more work in the passing game this week, then I could see him having a good day, but I don't think there's going to be too much room to run on the ground for DiMercato in this one. Next up, we got D'Onta Foreman going up against the Minnesota Vikings. This is a situation where if Roschon Johnson does not suit up, I still don't love D'Onta Foreman in this one. He does not catch a lot of passes out of the backfield, and this is a really tough, I mean, not really tough, but they're a stingy run defense in Minnesota right now. And also, D'Onta Foreman has been a healthy scratch the past couple of weeks, so do I really expect him to have a massive game? Probably not. Then in that same tier, we have Tyjae Spears against the Baltimore Ravens. Tyjae Spears has been on the incline for sure. He's definitely trending in the right direction, while Derrick Henry has been on the decline, trending in the wrong direction here. I don't really think that you can start Tyjae Spears over Derrick Henry, but Tyjae Spears is a sneaky little flex play here with definite receiving upside that we've seen. And then last but not least, Tyler Algier against the Washington Commanders could see an increased workload in this one. Like I said earlier, if this game goes in the Atlanta Falcons' favor where they can run the ball a lot more, then I would expect Bijan to get around that 20 carry mark, and then maybe Algier gets 10 to 15 carries. So once again, a little sneaky flex play. I can't have him in my, top 2 starting running backs though on my team for sure. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.